The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of AIHA. AIHA does not endorse any guest or the entity that they represent. On this episode of Healthier Workplaces, considering the future of OEHS with AIHce23's keynote speaker, Dr. Poppy Crum. Welcome to another episode of Healthier Workplaces. I'm Bob Krell, founder and publisher of Healthy Indoors Media, and your host for this program from AIHA. Stay with us.
The newly updated 6th edition of the Noise Manual is available at the AIHA University Bookstore. This edition contains new chapters on impulse noise, phototoxicants, fit testing, and community exposure. Noise is an omnipresent hazard for industrial hygienists and OEHS practitioners. Find the right information with this valuable resource for noise prevention and more in your workplace and communities. Update your noise knowledge today. Available in print and digital formats. Visit aiha.org/noise for a free preview.
We are back again live from AIHce 2023 in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Bob Krell, the host of the Healthier Workplaces show, and welcome back. Really excited with us. We have a special live interview, live discussion with our keynote from this morning, Dr. Poppy Crum, and also joining us is Manji Danga.
Yes.
So
I am so excited right now. I'm sure y'all, if you're looking at this or hearing this, I'm telling you that I'm pumped, and I'm pumped because the person to my right did a keynote this morning, the best keynote I've heard at a conference, you know. And if you missed it, hopefully you can get to see it virtually. If you don't know who this person is, you can look him up. But Dr. Poppy Crum is here, and we're so excited to have her. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Manji, and Bob for having me here too. And it has been a really fun morning, I have to say. We just came out of the question and answer period and had some of the domain expertise merged with these beautiful philosophical theoretical questions, but with how do we action on things now? And I think that's the really exciting part that happens here. And you've got really a brilliant constituents in this organization. So.
And I think that there's a lot we can learn from the way you presented, because you showed us science, you showed us research, you talked about research, but you showed us and talked about things that are tangible today, right? Mm-hmm. So we're not necessarily talking about things that are to come. And I think that's what got people excited to say what she's presented, looking at these devices or these approaches, and then how we circle it back to workers. One question I had for you, by the way, is I see the work that you're doing as a liberation for that user, right? So, and I wonder for that worker too, because today, if I go and I do my industrial hygiene thing, I tend to put a sensor on a person, and then later on, I write this report, right? And what I heard from you was we can get to a place where that worker is getting that information maybe instantaneous, if you will, and maybe they have the ability and the authority to perhaps start making interventions in their workplace while that stuff is going on. And that's my ideal, because many times I feel guilty about, I have to get on a plane and then start doing these things. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's a place we can get to, maybe not too far away from now.
Absolutely. And it's the idea of forecasting and what kind of intelligence we gain through this, what's really been, I'd say, a revolution in the last few years with regard to so many of these sensors, whether it's on body or in our environments, and enabling continuous data. And continuous data that whether it's blood glucose or electroencephalograms or even eye gaze, all of this information in its right form and its interoperable intelligence becomes a really rich picture that there's a lot of opportunity for forecasting. An example, when I was introducing digital twins in my talk, I was showing the reef tank I have in my house, and the transformation of a healthy ecosystem where we go from where it started, where I was reactive, sampling, measuring things at the beginning, measuring things with very crude in points of intersection and limited points of human interaction where frankly it was unsuccessful until the point now where I've got everything digitized. I have continuous data across a number of elements that let me have a very dynamic optimized ecosystem. And I use the word one thing, it's how do we make an effective ecosystem with this data that lets us forecast health and safety, and the things you just mentioned with where you can be proactive instead of reactive because of that data and have interventions that are faster, quicker, before there's so that you're enabling instead of fixing.
Yes,
is a huge capability.
And by the way, on her presentation, she had this slide with the aquarium and then a bunch of dashboards she had created with all with all the variables. I think that's great. And now, just like that aquarium, I think we could take some of these information and to not also overwhelm these users and workers and give them the information that they need, because sometimes I feel too in our communication as scientists, we overwhelm and we write a report or we have a dashboard with 5 things when maybe the worker just needs the one thing.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the communication of these, whether technologies or these outputs, it should be really important how we think about, visualizing those, or is it maybe it's an audio message instead of a dashboard? Maybe it's how have you thought about those communication mediums or manners?
That's a beautiful question, and because the user experience with data is frankly everything. An autonomous system is one thing, but we're human. And human brains don't need all the data. We need the right data weighted in the most effective ways, because that's going to shape how we behave. It's going to shape our reactions. It's going to shape the insights we have. And visual is, I often talk about embodied UX. And embodied UX for me is when you start thinking about not just, I'm going to put a visual display in front of people in the same standard way I've always done that. Instead, it's like, wait, I've got other faculties. I've got other ways of sensing data and information. Sometimes sound is the best. Is it speech? Is it auditory cues? Is there sonification of information in different environments that makes me, intersects with what I see so that I, can deliver different information? I mean, we're at a point where you can deliver audio in a construction environment that's associated with, safety zones,
Yes.
or you can, because it can be tagged with GPS data, right? And, you have that information associated with when you hear a particular sound, or how you connect to experts and information at a particular location based on some sort of digital representation of information, or sonifying, because when you think about augmenting data into these environments so that people can be reactive about potential hazards and things, it's not, a visual display is not always the best way to have the right visceral augmentation of human capability where you're going to get the reaction you want. Because what you want is for someone to react in a way that's going to be the most helpful for it.
I'll tell you a story at work. So I was reading about this thing called natural language processing, and so I was like, okay, this sounds really fancy. And so I got a bunch of behavior-based observations that were being inputted by workers, right?
Yeah.
They're typing them in. And so I looked at these data, and I was playing with them, and I thought, and it wasn't really working, so I thought, is it me? And what I realized is they were writing in incomplete sentences, and, grammar was off and things like that. So I came to my coworker, and I said, we need to teach people to write incomplete sentences, because this language thing is not going to pick up unless these people change the way they do things. And then what she told me is, you're talking about a segment of workers who actually don't log into computers that much.
Yeah.
They don't write emails. So this idea of trying to change the human to adapt to the technology is going to fail. They don't write emails, so they're not going to write complete sentences such that you can teach this model to understand what it is they're saying. And so then we talked about, okay, maybe we do a voice to text, but then I was like, oh, the environment is too noisy. So maybe thinking from a human factors perspective, are there times where we actually try to fit the human to the technology and not the way around? Because that's what I was trying to do, and it seems like sometimes we do that based on how devices are designed or how algorithm works or things like that.
We do that all the time, and we do that based on our workflows and the systems that exist, and we try to make perturbations in one dimension that we can, and there's no question about that. That's So there are different things. Technology can actually. So I remembered my thought that I wanted to use, which ties back into this. Humor me for a moment, but where you were talking about the importance of visualization in my talk, one of the examples when I'm introducing people to digital twins, which isn't new. It's the concept's been around a long time. It's just how much data, the resolution, the sampling, the dimensionality of that's changed. But it comes back to this question that you said, but with the importance of visualization is, like air traffic controllers. Imagine if an air traffic controller were watching an Excel sheet, right? Or were watching something that didn't have, the spatial or had spatial representations that were not intuitive, that they hadn't, that the mental representation, the reactions, the decisions they would be making would be very different, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so that digitization of physical information and how it's represented to a user. Now, we're in a different place where we think about, that data has other dimensions
Yes.
that are optimized for as well. And it changes, again, it's how do you create a system that can understand as effectively as possible, not as efficiently, effectively as possible, a better outcome. And when you say, how do we always take data and systems and try to change the user? I mean, we have a history of doing that for sure.
I can think about not only just trying to fit that human being to the technology, but also how we communicate what it is we're doing with that sensor. So Bob, I may say, Bob, wear this thing, and you'll say, well, why do I got to wear it? Well, because I need information. Okay, about what? Are you recording me? Things like that. So I would say not only is maybe sometimes it's a physical thing where we're trying to force somebody to wear something that doesn't fit, but think also introducing something new into their ecosystem that they're not used to is its own sort of compelling. Maybe you're forcing them to do something within their space that's not normal.
Somewhat invasive.
Yeah, exactly. Especially workers, because I feel like when it's maybe Alexa in my work when I'm cooking and I'm telling her to play music, she's on my side. But if I'm in the workplace and they're asking me to wear stuff, why?
Well, I mean, that's a social context of how it affects when you when you give someone a technology, a sensor, or something to wear, it impacts how they behave. Now, it impacts in different ways. It might impact it, if it's a constraining sensor, if it's something that causes a little more weight on my arm or something, it causes me to move differently. It causes me to make decisions with even just subtle motions in my body. If it's something that I know is recording me, it changes what I might say. It changes how I might interact. And so your data becomes biased. It becomes shaped in different directions. One of the things, and I talked about this, I teach a class, my class at Stanford is really focused on, it's neuroplasticity in video gaming, but they develop games, but it's less about developing video games, but it's more about thinking of what is the right, when you engage with a technology in any way it shapes your brain, it's going to shape it in any sort of learning or use of a technology causes our brains to be different behaviorally, but at the sensory level, in how we engage with it, but then also at the social level. So if I am going to create a game where I want someone to be learning about a body movement, or I'm trying to teach something in a game, maybe it's empathy, or maybe it's understanding a spatial environment, and I have them working on a computer screen on a keyboard with left and right arrows, that's not a very embodied exchange, right? So you want to try to take what is the thing I want to learn, how do I make that in movements that are going to translate, what are the implications going to be, how am I going to share that? And then distilling it back to, because I did this, what else happened, right? What else have I altered in terms of how people engaged with that technology or with each other? And there's, I think there's a lot of things that happen in those spaces, but any time that you go in those directions. So.
Interesting. Can you clarify for me digital twin, this idea of a digital twin?
Yeah.
Because I've heard it from a machine perspective. Let's say we have this pump and we create a digital twin of this pump and sort of run it to maximum, things like that. But do I have this concept right? Can I create a digital twin of a worker such that, let's say we have a building design and I can have this worker digital twin walk through this space because you gave me the CAD drawing of your building to see maybe
Yeah.
where your pipes are, and would they hit it, or where the platforms are? Would that be a concept that fits within the digital twin? Or is how am I looking at it
Absolutely.
aligned with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I look at, you've got you've got companies right now that in a building are really focused on fine asset management tracking, right, in terms of a digital twin. So whether it's a construction site or it's a hospital, having the physical devices, the ones that move, the ones that are static, actually have you can have sensors that are that are very high acuity in typically GPS denied, GNSS denied environments because through other technologies. So you're gaining this like rich insight to how things move in that space. Well, the one you care the most about is now the human and human efficiency, let's say effectiveness, but also just knowledge for knowing where things are and being able to track that building. The digital twin in that space is for the health of the environment, whether it's intersecting with even HVAC systems and operationalizing the environmental space, but it's also at the hospital level that intelligence of movement, asset tracking between individuals and devices ends up saving time for patients. It ends up saving time for clinicians. It ends up to a higher quality of experience for both the patient and less overtime and more effectiveness for the workflow in that space.
And what kind of data you need to create a digital twin? So let's say Bob here and I put a sensor on him for a year that collects enough information such that we can now move to the construction of a digital twin. Like how high level, how does it? Because I'm assuming you need a lot of data to replicate that twin, right?
Well, I mean, okay. So I think for me, one of the important things is to say, okay, we don't need to, we don't need to solve for the future state of things that honestly we haven't even mapped out. Like we haven't figured out all the ways that we can protect this data as we go forward. What you want to think about in wrapping your mind around where's a digital twin effective for me is it can even, again, we don't want all the data. You want the data that's relevant to make your world more efficient, more effective, more successful, improve the quality of product, quality of output, quality of forecasting that you can bring to your environment and to your successes. So, in a workplace, do you need a digital twin of someone's body? Probably not, right? Do you need a digital twin of, how people behave, in an anonymous way in an environment? That could be helpful. Now, does having a little bit of data? It depends on the data.
True. Right?
It depends on the dimensionality of that data. What you need is, a little bit of data can go a long ways if it's the right data. And, I use the example of in a factory, I think digital twin, Microsoft Azure's, prototype example is, a factory where you've got, factory lines that have, temperature and humidity. And you've got product that came off of that somewhere that had mold. Historically, you would have to pull all of that product. You'd be in a place where you wouldn't have control over that environment. But just having the humidity sensors, you can identify one particular production line that was 2 degrees off and a point on it. So you need to find track the product that came off of that line. And, do you need, 10 years of data to drive that? No, you just need enough to know that there's a differential and that something was off.
Well, that type of case, though, is more of a real-time situation, too.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that the feedback that you're looking for, or as far as what you're displaying, is going to be really specific to the individuals, right? I mean, that's the thing. As you mentioned, too much data is not going to be actionable. So you need to tailor it toward.
So absolutely, and I talked about this a tiny bit in my talk, but it's really more like the start of something. Is when you think about the way all of I like to umbrella everything under what I call situational intelligence, and in the military, it's a very common term to say situational awareness, and situational awareness is it breaks down into sort of 3 components. It's like perception, comprehension, and insight. and perception being first, the point at which you have like your how fast your brain and the system, whether it's an autonomous system or a human system, can take in key information about the environment, perceive it, comprehend it, and have insights to action on it, right? That's situational awareness. And it is foundational, I believe, to every part of our lives, in work, in home, in my interactions walking down the street. It's it's a term we should just thrive on and especially in terms of how our technology fits into those boxes, what it's doing, because perceiving is the sensors, then sort of semantic contextual intelligence, domain intelligence around that is the sort of comprehension. But what we do with that, that's where we start getting into machine learning and AI applications for insights around that data. And when I think about the situational intelligence umbrella that sits over that, you're in a place where the digitization of the physical world gets me into my situational awareness, and now I'm building these sort of loops where I can act on that data and have continuous insight that lets me drive from that. But it's only effective in terms of my brain, my system, if those semantic, the classes, the featurizations, the analytics on that data is simple and weighted and optimized for me to make the best decisions possible, right? So that's where the real value comes in. And it can be real time. I think the big shift is, how do you go from a building environment where it was, here's a digitization of an environment. You talked about the pump, and you look at there's digital twins of manufacturing plants with car manufacturing. It has done a lot with there's partnerships with Unity and with others to do digital twins of these designs. But a digitization, even if it's like a one-to-one digitization of a physical system, a physical environment, for me is not what I mean by a digital twin. That's a digital representation. It's how do we build the dynamic, intelligence and life and insights of data coming off of that into that system, so that there is information being gleaned, information being learned, information that digitization feels like a true partnership that's augmenting my sensory capabilities, and not just a place where I might, put a Post-it note or a sticker in my brain.
Because the digitization is just it's a digital representation of that ideal. Let's say it's a building. Right. But what you're describing is, now that we've built that building, is it really operating the way we want it to, or is it as cool or hot as we want it to? Because you're bringing that, right, you can, more realistic, if you will. In that building, I can, everything to do with temperature, with lighting, with, movement of humans in the space and everything. Those are all ways of describing it that are part of the digital twin. But then there's also optimization and effectiveness and things, and how you can improve that become, and how that building, interacts with the. When I say interacts, it's the many different parameters that it can change, whether it is temperature, whether it is airflow, whether it is heating. I said heating, but whether it is also, things like sound and lighting, to change that impact how the individuals are successful in those spaces. And how wonderful would it be if we think about these things ahead of time rather than after, and think about everybody or the people that are going to be in that building. So if we look at a building, we say, okay, people are going to be here, for 8 hours, but maybe there's a crew that's there much longer, or there's folks in the kitchen versus the offices, and thinking about all those people, within that space is
absolutely. And there's, it's very doable, and the things that there's the success of the human, but the success of the human is dependent on things like lighting and light bulbs and things running out, and and you have all of those dynamics in your system that are then forecasting and predictive, so that work orders are effectively, that those can be AI generated for where things are going to fail, where things need to be replaced before they happen, before you have safety issues, before you have, the human impacted by something that's part of the building infrastructure or part of the building, success. But one thing I'd say is, it's embrace the polarity. Okay. And what I mean by that is, right now there are, so a couple folks I know I have a lot of respect for. They had a film called Social Dilemma. It was on
Yes.
Netflix. I'm in the credits. You'll see me there. I'm actually I'm very technology optimist. You know that probably from listening to me, but it doesn't mean I don't think a lot and worry a lot and worry hopefully action. I try to think about actions, and I've got a lot I'm thinking about right now for how we protect against technology abuse in areas. And but the folks who did that film are people I know, and one of them is Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin, and they have if you Google their names, they did it will terrify the heck out of you. I'm just telling you this right now. It's about the existential threats of AI, and it's got some great examples of things just going really, really badly.
Yeah, that's potentially.
I
mean, that's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but when I say embrace the polarity, I'm like, go listen to that. Get really scared, but then come back and think about, okay, where are the don't get really scared. Sorry, don't do that. That's not what I mean. But you've got to hear it because. Sorry, I probably have my mic a little too close to my mouth. But it is important to anticipate these things and not be. Don't just throw them out. Understand why these things might happen or where the biggest vulnerabilities are, and also. There's no question there's great opportunities and things that need to happen to protect against one, which it can happen. So the polarity is go that direction, but also go the direction of where generative AI, where some of these opportunities, how impactful they are going to be and can be and are already. I mean, from a generative AI point, there are a lot of obvious applications in fairly, I'd say, mundane areas that open up great capability for better data, for improved interactions with technology and workflows that are real. It doesn't mean that you're also embracing the other polarity, but you're understanding, okay, this is what I think has lots of utility in my world.
Yes.
I want to understand that. These are some really big theoretical questions and examples that are we've got to understand. I mean, not understand, but we need to protect against.
There needs to be some guardrails.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely. Clearly. And that's where we're at today. And I talked a lot about healthcare and things, and there's no question. There's just we have got to move forward on some of these things. And but I want in my talk I spent a lot of time on some of the potential for what I call the two biggest phenotypes of our of future healthcare, which are voice and breath. So the digital exhaust, the chemical composition of my breath is a big indicator for cancer, for multiple sclerosis, for also quality of life, emotional well-being. But the dynamics of my speech, there's been huge, I'd say, advancements in academia and in industry in the last 5 years in terms of speech diagnostics, being able to predict very quickly likelihood of psychosis, neurodegeneration, depression, in ways that are scalable, accessible, low cost. You're looking at personalized medicine in a place where it is accessible. I lost both my parents to different types of cancer in places where they were a large part of their quality of life and things happened in the end because of treatment that was very domain specific and not holistic. Like there isn't enough interoperability in terms of what we know about one system and that treatment impacts the other. And I mean, there is a lot known, but it's not very scalable and doesn't reach the broad populations in the ways it needs to. And these types of technologies are there. They're really capable, even getting drug treatments for things like, so for example, the predictors in speech for neurodegeneration and Alzheimer's are really quite successful. And yet the NIH doesn't use speech diagnostics in any way because the FDA doesn't recognize them and needs plasma screenings. Yet, these are ways to reach people that don't know they can benefit, which ends up impacting different demographics more than others. And we've got to embrace these things. And find the route forward as opposed to being very concerned about the other polarity only. And so that's where I'm trying to get to, is there's big opportunities to move us forward that we want to embrace, but we've got to build the infrastructure to allow us to protect against them.
Dr. Crum, this has been a really wonderful conversation. And the audience, I think one thing I really like about her is how she communicates. Many of us are scientists, but you do such a good job of communicating the science and making it relevant. I think that should be equally celebrated. So thank you for that.
So, yeah, so we're out of time, unfortunately. It always goes too fast. But I'd like to, again, thank Dr. Poppy Crum for joining us here in a little after session after your keynote this morning. And Mwangi Daga, thanks for coming in here and moderating this. That was great. We'll continue our coverage here live from AIHce 2023 in Phoenix, Arizona. Bob Krell, I'm the host of the Healthier Workplaces show for AIHA, and we're going to keep coming back to you throughout the day and throughout the week here. So stay tuned, and we'll see you soon.
So that's our show for this week. We'll be back again with another episode of Healthier Workplaces. Until next time, I'm Bob Krell. Stay healthy.